All right, yes, it is the meat and potatoes. And as I talked about in the introduction, I am delighted to welcome back my good friend and partner from Fuelin, Scott Tindal. Scott, welcome once again.
G'day, Matty. Thanks for having me. Yep, as always, happy to dive into some of your athlete questions. Some of these might be sprinkled with some of your own, I suspect. So let's crack on and get into it.
We will, yeah. We're doing things a little bit different today. We're gonna we'll call it the Scott Tindal Quickfire section, and this is part one of two episodes we're going to do with you. I thought we've had so many questions over the last month or two, and what I thought we would do is separate out and do this first whole section on race nutrition and hydration. And then next week, we're going to come back and we're going to do a great episode more on the life performance, whatever you want to sort of talk about it, platform of health, energy in the day, showing up better in life, no matter what the arena we care about. So if you fasten your seatbelt, I'm just going to hold you to task and read them out, and we'll hear what you say. If you're ready to lock and load.
Mate, let's go.
All right, good stuff. So, question number one. These questions, by the way, for you guys, the listeners. These came from the Purple Patch athletes, as well as some of you guys, the listeners, that we've had trickle in over the last 6 to 8 weeks, and really pertinent. We're kicking off, or we're deep now into the race season, so it's a great time. So here is your first one, and Scott, we're starting with I think a little bit of a dandy here. It's a great one here. So this listener said, I have a lot of digestion and GI issues in every Ironman race I do, which of course is very, very common. And it often occurs by the end of the bike. I feel bloated. I often get caught up with bathroom breaks on the run. And I have tried every gel and chew under the sun, liquid nutrition, real food. I would just like if you have any insights into maybe what the cause might be, or how I could go about setting a path to put improvements. It's a good one. It's a very common challenge.
Yeah, great question. Very common. I think first and foremost, probably for this athlete, just understanding that there is no underlying medical conditions that could be contributing to this. So, if there is a family history of celiac disease or irritable bowel syndrome or anything like that, certainly want to get that cleared. FODMAP sensitivities, any history of bowel or stomach disease or cancers in the family, certainly get that looked at. And depending on the age of the athlete, that could be something to consider. But more likely, let's just focus on it's likely a nutrition and training perspective. My first thing would be to ask the athlete, how often are they actually practicing their race nutrition and hydration in training? Because that's going to be probably the most common mistake that a lot of athletes make. They go into a race, try and consume high amounts of carbohydrates and potentially fluids, and that causes issues because their gut simply is not used to doing that. So that would be the first thing I'd be asking. How often are they practicing it? Are they doing their fueling at the race intensity that the coach is asking them to do it at? Is it in the expected race temperature? If you're always training in cool environments with the lovely fan on and doing it all very pleasantly, but then you're going and racing at Kona and the temperature is very hot, that's going to have an impact on the way in which you handle large amounts of carbohydrates. I think the other really important point here is managing hydration and understanding hydration needs in relation to carbohydrate requirements. So off the top of my head, I'm thinking, okay, is this athlete trying to get all their carbohydrates from fluids, and actually they're over consuming total fluids in order to get their amount of carbohydrates, and in doing so that's actually causing excessive fluid intake. So then understanding what the minimum amount of fluid that they could apply carbohydrates to and drink those, and then potentially increase the amount of carbohydrate intake through solids such as gels or blocks. That is something that I would be asking and getting the athlete to consider and explain that further. The final problem or the final issue could be the actual amounts of carbohydrates they're consuming relative to their energy expenditure or the power output. So they might be consuming a mixture of maltodextrin or glucose and fructose, but actually they don't require that. They don't need these multiple transportable carbs because actually their output is not that high. and maybe they only need 60 or 70 grams an hour and could actually do that just on maltodextrin. So that's sort of the questions I'd be asking the athlete, and certainly wanting to sit down and talk to them about that in more detail.
Can I ask another? I guess two little related points or considerations on my side, where a lot of athletes tend to say, "Oh, these don't work for me. These choose these bars," which of course is a taste component in that. But it's you didn't mention sort of that as a leading subject, and I'll just make I'll go back in the ages. Power bars are terrible, or Cliff bars are great, and I just did that because they're the old school. So rather than talk about more of the modern nutrition, quite often that's not really the culprit. There is some synergy of like, okay, this is what tastes good that I can get down, etc. There is personal preference, but the stuff that you talked about there tends to be much more of the predominant sort of points of investigation. Is that a fair enough point?
Yeah, I think, look, obviously the type of product that the individual chooses to use is going to play a role, but it's probably like you think of a hierarchy in terms of trying to troubleshoot here. And, I'd probably say, yes, the palatability and those ingredients are going to be important. As I said, it relates to maybe what the ingredients are in that product. But I think probably more likely is, even if with really bad tasting or not such a great product, if you practice a lot with it, there is potential that you can strengthen the gut and train the gut to actually tolerate that in higher amounts.
That's great. And then the one other just point of consideration, a more broad lens from the coach's lens, is the tendency for athletes to show up to these races overstressed, overtired, which of course diminishes the gut's ability to actually transport this stuff as well. Just more of the coaching side of stuff. That was just my point, but I think that's pretty great answer to a very interesting question to kick us off. So let's move to question number 2, because it's somewhat related to something that you said in there. So I'm just going to read it out, and it's great, which was this athlete said, "I was listening to the approach of some of the pros around their nutrition and hydration in racing, and a thought struck me. They seem to be racing at a much higher intensity than I can hold," which is, yeah, that's pretty true. "And their races often last potentially hours less than my humble performances can deliver." And so the question is, what are the considerations and the differences of demands of, let's say, a 12 to 16 hour Ironman versus an Ironman athlete that's doing 7 to 9 hours like the pros do?
Yeah, it's a great question, and this comes down to, I think there's several parts in it. So, firstly, probably discussing relative versus actual energy expenditure, and power, or relative and absolute power, because this athlete might be working at a relative intensity of, say, zone 3 or above, which is their race pace, but their actual energy expenditure or their actual power may be only sitting at 150 watts. And that's going to be very different to, say, let's talk about a professional female might be sitting at 240, 260, professional male. Oh God, I mean, they're pushing well over 300 watts now as an average. So their actual energy expenditure is going to be very different, but their relative intensity is actually the same. But that does play into how much they should be considering consuming. So if you take this athlete and you say, okay, well, their absolute power is actually a lot lower, then theoretically you'd be saying, okay, their energy intake could be lower than, say, a professional athlete. The caveat to this is that the age group athlete that you're describing is going for a lot longer. So net, maybe their total energy expenditure across the time, because one's doing 7.5 hours and one is doing 14 hours, actually works out probably the age group athlete actually expending a little bit more. So what you've just got to manage is what that intake is for those hours that they're doing. Now, if we think about, okay, the professional athlete's pushing out a lot more power and maybe the age group athlete is pushing out a lot less power, we can still confidently say that for, say, a female athlete on the bike pushing out 160, 170 watts, if they're doing that for certainly more than 3 hours, and as a male athlete pushing out anywhere between 210 and 220 watts consistently for 3 hours or more, they're going to benefit from 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. okay, which is really important because even though their total energy output is lower than that athlete, based on total calories, they're going to require still a decent amount of energy intake to continue to perform at the level that they're performing at. And again, relatively speaking, they're working hard. It's just that their actual athletic ability isn't as good as the professionals, hence the difference between an age grouper and a professional. So the long and the short is, if you're pushing, again, as a female athlete, somewhere between 100, let's say 160 watts or more for that Ironman pace, and for a male, 210, 220 watts, and you're doing that for more than 3 hours, you are likely going to benefit from higher amounts of carbs, at least up to 90 grams an hour. And getting to that level probably is listening to question one. How often are you practicing it? Are you practicing it in the environmental conditions? Are you practicing it regularly? Are you practicing at the intensity of the bike? Are you practicing with the products that you're actually intending to use? So you can see that relationship between question one and then question two.
Yeah, I mean, it dovetails nicely, and it's in fact it's a whole arm of. And knowing this isn't a promotion for Fuelin, but this is a whole arm of what you help athletes navigate through: the testing, the understanding of their body, integrating, and then when you work with someone like me as a coach, where we integrate these with specific simulators, so that you have the opportunity for the athlete to practice this in the conditions as close as we can, obviously at the intensity, and then we start to go on a journey, because it is that to build up the capacity to get to those levels and understand what is actually working for them and doesn't work with them, so they can go in with, what's this revolutionary word? That's right, a plan. It's a great answer for you.
And just on that, Matty, and I think it's something that Dr. Alan McCubbin, he often refers to it, and I love stealing it. But it's like, the first time you did, a hard bike session, it probably hurt. Your muscles got really sore, and you were like, if you said to yourself, "Whoa, I'm never going to do that again because I got sore. I'm just going to sit back on zone one all the time," you're not going to improve. And it's no different with pushing higher amounts of carbs in. We're not saying you have to make yourself sick, but you might make yourself uncomfortable when you take in these higher amounts of carbs. And it may not feel great the first time. Second time you take in the same amount, same product, same intensity, same duration, you're like, that wasn't so bad. Third time, that was pretty easy. You're training your body to become accustomed to the stress that's being applied to it. That is called adaptation. And that is how you improve. It's no different from training. Nutrition is the same. You can train your gut, you can train your body how to cope with these higher amounts of carbohydrates if you practice it.
And that's absolutely proven. That's that's not just observational. That's absolutely proven, which is great. All right, so let's dance on to number 3, because we promised quick fire, and this is a favorite one. We transition a little bit here. So here are some ABCs for you. I love this. This question's from athlete. Says, I would love to hear you discuss pre-race meal ideas around these areas. Number 1, 2 to 3 days prior to the race. What should that look like? Number 2, the night before the race, the dreaded pre-race meal. And number 3, the morning of the race. So we're outside of race fueling here. We're just talking about the days leading up. 72 hours, 24 hours, or 18 hours, and then morning of the race. What do you think on these?
Okay, part A, obviously in race week, you're considering doing a carbohydrate load, certainly for any sessions or races lasting more than 90 minutes, certainly any races lasting more than 2 hours. Carbohydrate load will start at least 48 hours before the start of the race. In that 48 hours before, you're probably aiming around 6 to 8 grams per kilo body weight. In the 24 hours before the race starts, you're aiming for anywhere between 8 and 12 or more grams per kilo body weight. What does that mean in terms of actual food? You're probably minimizing vegetable intake. You're minimizing fiber intake. You're focusing on high glycemic foods with high caloric density with a focus on carbohydrates. So you're likely going to be starting to reduce a little bit of protein and certainly some fat in there with a focus on getting total calories from carbohydrates. Foods that you would consider using, certainly on the day before for the actual load: kids' cereals, maltodextrin just in water, white rice, white bread, white pasta, fruits like banana, pineapple. using some chews or blocks, Haribo, gummy worms. They're good. And then just layering in some fats and protein. So you can still consume some olive oils, some nuts. You can consume chicken or simple white fish, depending on your preference and your dietary preference. You may, if you're a plant-based athlete, just choosing simple tofu. And that's what you're trying to do. You're just focusing on getting a lot of carbohydrates in without the bulk. And that's really the mainstay of that period of time.
Wow, it's really high octane stuff. That's interesting. What about the morning of the race?
Okay, so then you go morning breakfast. What you will have done is also practice this. Okay, so morning of the race, you're choosing a race day breakfast that you've practiced in training several times leading up to the race, so that when you come to race day breakfast, you're removing any anxiety about what should I be eating. It just is automatic. You know exactly what you prefer to eat on a race day because you've practiced that before race day simulations. Now, a couple of options could be, depending on who you are as an athlete. I personally like overnight protein oats with maple syrup, fruit salad, couple of slices of toast with some jam, aiming for somewhere between trying to get 2 to 3 grams per kilo body weight of carbohydrates in those 2 to 3 hours before the race starts. Other athletes, staple favorite of people like Holly Lawrence, Sky Munch, Ben Canute, and Jan, was just simple boiled white rice, a yogurt over the top, some blueberries, maple syrup, banana, and then having toast with jam. And they would easily, consistently consume that. And it's obviously in the amount specific to their body weight. Again, probably, if we're not even talking grams per kilo body weight, somewhere in that sort of 150 to 200 grams of carbs in the 2 to 3 hours leading into the race. So a lot of food.
It's and by the way, you're helping me here because we dance on to the next question, and we're going to talk about the pros. So, so you just
There's one bit, Matty, you just missed the night before. I know we sort of covered the night before, but I just want to touch on the night before. And I actually just did a reel on Instagram talking about this because it's one of the most common mistakes I see with athletes is they think the night before is a carbohydrate load. No, it's part of the carbohydrate load. That big bowl of pasta or that big bowl of rice, all those carbohydrates, whatever you're consuming, is part of the total carbohydrate load. Remember, you're aiming for somewhere between 8 and 12 grams per kilo of body weight of carbohydrates. That meal in the evening may contain 100, 150 grams of carbs. You've still got somewhere between 500 and 700 more grams to eat throughout the day. So that's really important. A simple meal the night before. I know the athlete asked for simple things. Again, go back, white rice, yogurt, maple syrup, with maybe some protein, some milk. That might be what's eaten for lunch and breakfast. Or it could be a version of white rice. So just chicken, white rice, sweet chili sauce. Something as simple as that. Very bland, non-gourmet, non-Jamie Oliver, but it gets the job done. You know that it sits well. You know you've practiced this, and you know you're getting the total calories and, importantly, the total carbohydrates.
fantastic.
Oh, and then the last point, try and finish by 6:30. 6:30. So you're front loading the day before. You're getting all those carbs in early, so that last meal, 6:30, finish that. You're trying to get to bed by, hopefully 7:30. Try and get some sleep because you're probably going to be up at 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yep.
And that's really important as well.